So we said from the Yotze Pelos HaTorah two things. The first thing we said is that if you visit a person in the hospital who is sleeping or is in a coma, you still fulfill the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. And the second thing is that if the person is right in front of you, you don't mention their name. You simply say, Ba'avur ha'choleh hazeh. You don't have to mention their name at all. Now, they have an interesting question over here is, can you say Tehillim for someone who is not Jewish? I've had this question asked to me many times. A person works in an office and their boss is not Jewish. Or they have a friend in the office who's not Jewish and their child is sick. So they say, could you do me a favor? Could you pray for my child? So a Jew says, well, how do I pray? I pray by saying Tehillim. Can you read Tehillim for a non-Jew and say that Hashem should make this non-Jew, Mary Smith, have a refuah shalema? That's an interesting question. Yes. And he brings down from many different poskim that he says that you're allowed to, that it's totally permitted to do it. He says even the head of the Eidah HaCharedit in Yerushalayim, Dayan Weiss, wrote in a letter in Elul Tovshin Ayin Aleph that he heard from many Gedolei HaTzadikim that they daven to Hashem for a non-Jew to get better. It could even be a Kiddush Hashem. He even brings it down from the head of the basin of Kloisenberg. So it's very interesting that if a person is even not Jewish, our way of davening is to say Tehillim. So if our way of davening is to say Tehillim, so that's what we do, and that's how we daven for someone not Jewish.
Then, when you finish the Tehillim, you say the
well, I don't know if you would say the
name.
Yeah, you say, could you please send
in English, you have to say.
Yeah, send the refuah shlema to Joyce Smith. Whoever it might be. That's what he says. That's how they pass it.
I tell them I say Tehillim. I was told, so they told me their mother's sick. So I said, I don't know if I could say Tehillim.
So now what's the answer?
Is yes.
Yes.
But
now the answer is yes.
It's a bracha before you say the
There's not really a bracha. You're saying just Tehillim.
It's like a paragraph.
It's a paragraph. I don't know if you would say the paragraph before or after, but you would say the Tehillim. Okay, Avram Avinu had a Brit Milah. He was 99 years old, and he was recuperating from his Brit Milah. What time of year did Avram Avinu have the Brit Milah?
Yom Kippur.
So, you say Yom Kippur. That's interesting because the Medrash brings down, and the Pirkei the Rabbi Eliezer says that Avram Avinu had his Brit Milah on Yom Kippur. Okay? That's what they say. Yom Kippur. To strengthen that position, they say that when it says that Avram Avinu ran and prepared all the food, V'hu omer aleim tachat ha'etz, who was under the tree, and they ate, they say that, why was he under a tree? He was in a sukkah. Yeah. That the Brit Milah was in Yom Kippur, that came a few days later, so he was already getting ready for Sukkot. Wow. That he had, that his Brit Milah was on Sukkot. Okay. The problem with this Pirush is that if you look from Rashi and everybody else, what time of year was it when the angels came?
Pesach.
Pesach.
Yeah.
Well, they came right after his Brit Milah, and that's Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is 6 months away from Pesach. Yeah. So it doesn't fit. Yeah. And we say that he came for Pesach because it says that she made Va'asi Ugot, he says Ugot Matzos. And when they went to Lot and Sodom, it clearly says the word Matzot. So if it was Pesach time, and we know Yitzchak was born on Pesach, then how does that fit to he had a Brit Milah on Yom Kippur? It's a little bit of a problem. By the way, just for a moment, it says that she made 3 sa'im kemach solas. She made 3 sa'ah. So one of my nieces had an extra credit question. The teacher asked, how many pounds is that? Not so simple to figure out. I figured it out. It's 26 pounds of flour. That means that's a lot of flour. A 5-pound bag, as most women make, is enough for challah. This was 26 pounds. It means
5 of them.
6 bags of flour. Because she wasn't making 2 challahs. She was probably making 30 or 40 challahs. There was a lot of people there. Bless you. So, what?
Sarah?
26 pounds?
No, who
No,
make it?
who was
Sarah. So I was making a lot. So you should just be aware she was making a lot of matzah, a lot of bread, whatever it was. Anyway, so we have a problem. Was it Yom Kippur, Sukkot? Was it Pesach? What time of year was it? So he brings down a chiddush from Menachem Mendel Miribnov, the Ribnov Rebbe. The Ribnov Rebbe was a big Hasidic Rebbe, very big tzaddik. And he says something fascinating. He says that they came on Yom Kippur Sukkot, and they stayed until Pesach.
Wow.
That means they didn't come for the day.
6 months?
They stayed for 6 months. So they came on Yom Kippur after the Brit Milah, and Avram said, listen, I have a hotel, stay. And they stayed.
6 months.
6 months.
Angels.
Angels.
8.
Ate.
The 8.
Slept. Drank. Acted human.
Oh, okay.
It was an act. And then coming Pesach time,
There you go.
they said to Avram about the birth of Yitzchak, and then they went to destroy Sodom. So it's a very shocking opinion over here. Okay, it's extremely shocking opinion
Yeah, never heard.
that I never heard of this either. He says that they came before it says, and he would say that Kolomar Shabo Besukot Visho Etzlo, they remained by him at Chag Pesach. And when they were leaving, that's when they got the matzahs, and that's when they told him about the birth of Yitzchak, and that's when all the other stuff happened. So this was a 6-month little process.
When
Oh, so that's what
Yitzchak
it's
was
just-
born,
What?
holiday.
And not many people taking
But
guess
from
for
Yom Kippur
6
to
months.
Pesach is not 9 months, no?
It's 6 months.
Yeah, but
Oh.
Yitzchak born.
No. What they said on Pesach to Avram and Sarah says, next year this time you will have a child. Okay? Now we know what happened. After this, they had a whole thing with the wells and Avimelech, and then she became pregnant for a regular 9 months, and the baby was born on Pesach time,
Nee, after 1 year.
after 1 year.
So
She wasn't
altogether
pregnant
it's
for a
after
year.
1.5 year.
Yeah, that's what he
Altogether.
says. The whole story that we have in the beginning
From
of
Yom
this
Kippur to
was a 1.5
another
year
Pesach.
story, correct? A 1.5 year story. Now, it goes even something even further. You know, he says one other thing I'll tell you over here. He brings it down from Rabbi Meir Yitzchak of Copenhagen in a sefer called Karen or Pnei Moshe. But he says it over here in the Otzer Palos HaTorah. He brings it down as well from the Medrash Rabbah. And he says something very interesting, again, something unusual that you probably wouldn't hear under normal circumstances. He says that when Yitzchak was born, he was the first child ever put into a crib. You know what a crib is?
Коляска.
Alaska, ah.
Этот гробовый.
Ah,
He says that before that, most of the children were born and they were already walking when they were born. They weren't like babies we have. The first child that really was an infant, baby child that began, that couldn't walk, they needed a crib, was Yitzchak. He says, "Shekol hayeladim shel noldu ad Yitzchak Avinu noldu gedolim." They were like a little bit more mature. But by Yitzchak, he was the first one that was really born a baby. Then he says something shocking. He says the crib that Avraham Avinu made for this baby was a rocking crib. And Avraham would rock Yitzchak to sleep a little bit and sing him songs. He says because of that, when Yitzchak began to daven, he would always shake back and forth from davening because he remembered his father's davening. So he brings down that he says, it's an amazing thing. He says that when a Jew learns Torah or davens, he tends to shuckle. Shuckle means to go back and forth, to sway back and forth. And he brings down, that this came because of the way Avram raised Yitzchak, and Avram davened Shachar and Yitzchak davened Mincha. So he says that this type of davening was part of how he remembered when he was a child in the crib being rocked back and forth.
Everything in Torah connected.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
See,
everything.
that's what this Sefer does. Now, they only have 2 volumes so far, Bereshis and Shavuos, and I prepared for every week, something from this. And there are new things in there that, and every week so far you've been hearing new things that you haven't heard before, some things that are a little bit, wow. And I'm preparing something for next year, Vayera. I'm a year ahead of my Shiurim, so, we'll really, I'll tell you a little bit about it tonight. But at any rate, it obviously begs a question, and the answer is a little bit interesting. It begs a question, and that is, Avraham had a bris milah on Yom Kippur. He gave them food under the Sukkot, matzahs, Pesach. So they asked the question, how did he know all this? These were mitzvos that only came after they came out of Mitzrayim. It didn't even exist. I understand Brit Milah existed. I can understand where Hashem could have said to Avraham, listen, there's certain mitzvahs you need to know. Don't murder, don't kill, don't steal. Okay.
Simple.
Basic stuff. But we eat matzah because the Jews ate matzah in Mitzrayim. It's not possible to have a mitzvah like that today, in the days of Avraham. And how did Avraham know these mitzvahs? You can't say Hashem told it to him b'nevuah, because the person who gave us Torah was Moshe. Moshe, Torah, Tzivu, Lanu, Moshe. So everything came from Moshe. Yeah. And they say that Avraham even kept mitzvos d'Rabbanan. There were no d'Rabbanan. So the question is, how did that happen? The answer is a little bit shocking, and I'll go into it a little bit in detail, but I'm going to go next year into more detail. The Medrashim, and when I say the Medrashim, I'm talking about the Zohar and the Arizal and Reb Chaim Vital. They seem to imply that they're in Shamayim, the forces of evil. And remember, Hashem created the world in a balance. Yes. So there are forces of good, but they have to be balanced with forces of evil. So when you have Nevuah, which gives you a pipeline to Hashem, the forces of evil that have to balance that were very powerful. He says the forces of evil were so powerful, they, at every possible turn, they tried to destroy Bnei Israel. They wanted to destroy the Jewish people, the whole idea of a nation like Am Yisrael, the Torah, etc. And I'll give you an example. I have a divorce case where a man got involved with a lady who's not Jewish. And the wife wants nothing to do with this guy. That's it. You crossed the line. Finished. Nothing to talk about. No forgiveness. No. I have another case where the woman is having an affair. The husband is willing to take her back. I mean, I'm involved in so many cases. At any given time, over 100 cases. This person that he's involved with is not Jewish. And she wants to talk to me. She wants to tell me her story. She wants to tell me why it happened. She wants to tell me all about this guy. Not that it makes a difference. So she keeps calling the guy, the wife, I want to speak to your rabbi, I want to speak to your rabbi. Finally, I said, okay, give her my number. She didn't call me. When I emailed the husband, the man, I said, this woman didn't call me. She said, you'll never believe what happened. She was under so much stress. She's a 28-year-old girl. I got an email from her husband saying that you Jews, you killed my wife and you killed the mother of my daughter. She was rushed to the hospital. She had a heart attack and she died.
Wow.
She's been months wanting to talk to me. We're now in the final negotiations of the divorce settlement. And she finally gets my phone number on Thursday, Friday. Motzei Shabbos, I'm told she dropped dead. She died.
Wow.
My first reaction was, I don't believe it. I think they're just saying that so she shouldn't tell me all the horrible things that he did. So the wife calls me up Sunday morning and says, do you really think she's dead? So I said, I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if she had Tchiyat HaMesim. If she'll come back to life. Sunday afternoon, my wife comes down. She says, "You'll never guess who's on the phone." I said, "Who's on the phone?" "This girl's on the phone."
Wow.
So I said to my wife, "Where is she calling you from?" So my wife says, "I really don't know. It's either Shamayim or
Underground.
the other guy. I don't know where she's calling from." Because I was on the phone, and my wife was beeping me. I didn't answer because I was on another case on the phone, dealing with a lawyer and this and that. So finally my wife says, "You got to take this phone call." I says, "Why?" Because she says, "This could be from the beyond." Of course she never died. She was in the hospital. It was all fake. They wanted to pretend she was dead. So she would stop bothering the people, and the people would stop asking her for information. It was fake. It was all fake. The best way to get someone off your case is to say they dropped dead.
Yeah.
So the Zohar says that the forces of evil wanted to destroy the existence of Am Yisrael, of the Jewish people. So Hashem had to protect them. So here they're going after Avram Avinu. They want to destroy him at every turn. So Hashem says, "You know what? We'll throw Avram Avinu into the fire. They'll leave him alone because they'll think he's dead." They say by Yitzchak, when he was at the Akedah, his neshama left him. There's a Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer that was the neshama left him, a different neshama came down. There's a whole thing that the neshama he had was a female neshama, then a male. We're going to talk about that soon, a little bit later. Yaakov fought the Malach, and he was limping, again. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov had near-death experiences. And these near-death experiences were a way to quiet the forces of heaven. Leave them alone, they're dead. They're no longer a threat.
Like clinical death.
What?
Like clinical death.
Like clinical death, yes. They say that when Yitzchak came back, the neshama came back by the Akedah, he made the bracha Mechayei Metim. So in Shemona Esrei, the first bracha is Magen Avraham, Avraham protects us. The second bracha is Mechayei Metim, is Yitzchak's bracha. Okay? Now, the next thing is really unbelievable. Avraham is called Avraham HaIvri, the Hebrew. Avraham the Hebrew. Why is he called Avraham HaIvri, the Hebrew? So some people say that Aver means opposite. He was opposite the whole world. Everybody believed this. And Avraham was opposite. He was on the other side. He believed that. So he was called Avraham HaIvri, the guy who always is different than everybody else.
Challenger.
Challenges what is the norms of the world. But the Zohar says, I think the Zohar, one of the Kabbalistic Sefer says, no. Ivri, Aleph Bet Reish, spells Ubar. Ubar means pregnant. When you're in the stomach of your mother, you're an Ubar. And Ubar means embryo.
The word, the Ivri itself.
Right. What do you learn when you're in the stomach? What?
Torah.
All the Torah.
No.
And what happens when you're born? You forget it.
Stop it.
When Avram went through the Kivshon Ha'esh, he was like a rebirth. This time Hashem did not let him forget the Torah, and that's where he learned all the Torah. That's how he knew all the Torah, and that's why he kept all the mitzvahs.
That's what the Zohar says.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he's called Avraham HaIvri. Avraham, who when he was a embryo, never forgot. He's still an embryo. He knows all the Torah. So it wasn't that he got a bin Nevuah, because the only one who could teach you Torah bin Nevuah was Moshe Rabbeinu. He got it from the Malach Hashem. He got it straight from the source.
When he was in the fire.
Then he was in the fire when he came out. And that's why by the Akedah, who told him not to shech Yitzhak? The Malach. But God told me. Imagine you work in a job. The boss says to you, I want you to do this. As you're going out, the secretary says, oh, by the way, the boss changed his mind. You don't have to go. Now, you might believe the secretary. You might not. But if the boss told you, you're not going to be the secretary. For Avraham Avinu to believe the Malach, what Hashem told him, can only be one thing. He remembered that Malach. That was the Malach who taught him all the Torah. It wasn't just a secretary. It was an extension of Hashem. So that Malach must have had tremendous credibility. So he was called Avraham HaIvri, because he was the guy who always remembered everything in the stomach. Now, next year, not for this year, I'm going to tell you just a little because I think you need to hear a little bit of what's going to be next year. Next year, they say that we know there's two Mashiachs that are supposed to come. Right? The first Mashiach is called Mashiach ben Yosef. The second Mashiach is Mashiach ben David. The Ari brings this down, and he says something that most people don't realize. And I went back and I'm going into it in much more detail than I'm going to tell you tonight. And next year you'll get in much more detail. We know there are 4 exiles. The exiles are based on a nevuah, a dream, that Nebuchadnezzar had in the book of Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar had this dream of this big statue. And the head was gold, that was Bavel. The hands were silver, that was Persia, Poras Umadai. Persia, Media, there were 2 countries, because you have 2 hands.
Yeah.
The body, the goof, was Greece, Yavan. And then Daniel says the foot is Edom. And that the last Golus, which is the most severe, the Galut we're in now, is Edom. Edom was Germany, Amalek, the Esau group. Comes the Ari and says, no. He says, a person has 2 feet.
Yes.
Right? A person has 2 feet. The last Golus is Edom and Ishmael. And since the feet are the longest part of the body, they're longer than the head and the hands and the torso, that Galut will be the longest. Then he says that Avram Avinu, when he was told, you're going to have Yitzchak, you know what he said? He didn't say, great, wonderful, I'm so happy I'm going to have a son, Yitzchak. The first thing out of his mouth is, Lu Yishmael Yechil Lefanecha. I hope Yishmael will be okay and will fear you. The word Lu, Lamed Vav, is 36. So the Arizal says there are 70 nations. 35 come from Edom, Esau, and 35 from Ishmael. He says if these 2 ever joined forces, no Jew would ever survive. If Edom and Ishmael ever became partners, allies, no Jew would survive. Avram Avinu says, I beg you, I daven you, make Edom hate Yishmael, make Yishmael hate Edom. And it's interesting that the Arab world hates the West.
Yeah.
America is the great Satan, and that's a tefillah from Avram Avinu. Now, there are 35 on each side. In order to counteract the 35, there are 36 tzaddikim. Get it? Lamed Vav tzaddikim. Lu is Lamed Vav. There's opinions that say there's 36 and 36, which is the Sanhedrin was 72. When Moshe made the Sanhedrin, there were 72 people. 2 stayed behind because you had 70 plus Moshe is 71. But he says 35 and 35 is 70. The Sanhedrin is 71. There's always one more tzaddik, just to balance and be ahead of the game. So, I mean, when I'm finished with this, I'm still writing it up. It's just amazing. Now, the next thing that result says is that Edom is represented by Shor, the ox, and Yishmael is Chamor, because when we went to the Akedah, he said, Shvu lachem po im Chamor. So they call Yishmael Am Hadom el Chamor. The Arizal said something else also very interesting. He says, why didn't Daniel see Yishmael as a kingdom? All the kingdoms, you saw the Babylonian kingdom, the Persian kingdom, the Greek kingdom, the Roman Empire. Why not the Arab Empire? He says because they don't have kings. They're Bedouin tribes. He says he writes this down there. Rizal wrote this down 400 years ago. He says Rome had a Caesar. the Arabs are all little tribes that fight with each other. They don't have a central command.
Busy.
They're not a kingdom. That's why Daniel didn't see it that way. That's what he says. So I found that to be very interesting. So he says, when Esau confronted Yaakov and says, "Are you ready?" Yaakov says, "I'm ready." Why? Yeshli shor v'chamor. That's what Yaakov says to Esau. I have a cow and a mule. What about camels? That's what he had most of all, camels. So they medrash. The Gemara says, what did he say to Esau? I'm ready for you. I have shor, Yosef, and I have chamor, Yehuda and Moshiach. So the Arizal says that Edom will be destroyed by Mashiach ben Yosef, which means that if today Edom is not a threat like they were the Holocaust, we've already gone through Mashiach ben Yosef. Who he was, I don't know, but somehow we've gone through that cycle. Yishmael will be destroyed only by Mashiach ben David, and if you're living now in the age of Arab terror, which we are, then we've already gone through Mashiach ben Yosef. It means we're up to Mashiach ben David.
Arizal himself was Mashiach ben Yosef. He says it.
So,
Rabbi Chaim Vital quotes
right. So it really, if you think about it, it really goes through some unbelievable things. Now, you have to appreciate that Avraham Avinu had a very difficult balance. Hashem says, "Take your son." He says, "My son, I have two children. You're Yachid, you're special." He says, "Each one's special. That you love, I love them both. Take Yitzchak." So why would we just go straight from the start? Why does Hashem say to Avraham, take Yitzchak? Why? Yeah. So the answer is you have to break him in gently. Here Avraham Avinu knew the entire Torah. He knew Hashem hates sacrifices and human sacrifices for sure. And now he's being asked to do something that goes contrary to everything he believed in. So you can't, they say, there's an old joke they say, that a person came home, he was on a vacation for 2 weeks, and the first thing he does, he walks into the house, and he asks his sister, how's my dog? He had a dog, Spot, how's my dog Spot? And she says, he ran in front of a car and he got killed. So he goes, couldn't you have told me that he was stuck in a tree and they couldn't get him down? And then maybe in an hour you could have said that that they took him to the vet and you should have broken him gently.
Gradually.
Gradually. What kind of a sister are you? How heartless are you? How's mom doing? She's stuck in a tree. You get the joke, huh? After he calms down from the dog, he says, "By the way, how's mom doing?" She's stuck in a tree.
That's what they want. That's what they want.
You wanted it slow, Give it to me slowly. She's stuck in a tree. So I know you like these stories. You're trying to figure where I make these things up over here. How do I make this stuff up? So so it seems that the test was a very difficult test, and Hashem says to Avram, "Kachno es bincho es yechidcho asher ahavto es Yitzchak." Like it's a slow process. So, and Avraham Avinu, is listening to this, and he has to make a choice. It's not an easy choice. Does he choose his child over Hashem? It's not an easy choice. And I'll give you an example. We're supposed to have a din Torah this week. It was canceled, and the lady said to me, I think I want to go to court. I said, why? She says, because I have a whole story. And I know Bet Din looks only at the facts. They're not going to care about the story. Maybe the judge will care about the story. Now, the truth is, the Bet Din cares more about the story than the court. But she doesn't understand that she's never been to court. So, and then she says, and I think that even if the rabbis told me I owe the money, I'm not going to pay it and I'll be angry. So believe it or not, I'm surprised at myself. At first I spoke to her a little bit about it, but I finally said to her, I said, if you know in advance that you might have to pay, And if you know in advance that if the rabbis tell you you have to pay, you're going to be angry, then go to court. This way, if the judge says you have to pay, you'll be angry at the judge, who's a goy, and not at the Torah, not at the rabbis. And, my wife overheard that. She's like, why'd you tell her that? I says, because some people come to Chachamim, to Rabbonim, because they want to know what's the right thing.
Yeah.
That means, if I owe you $100, then if the rabbis say I owe it to you, I'm happy, because this way I'll pay you and I won't owe it to you. But then some people don't want to do what's right. They want to be right. That means they don't care. I probably owe you the $100. I just want someone to tell me I don't have to pay you because you're not a nice person, and this way I can walk away and not pay you. That means some people don't want, to do what's right. They want to do what they want, what's best for them. And they want to find the person who's going to tell them that they're right. So I said to this person, I said, if that's what you want, if you really want to do what's right, then and you don't want to listen to the Rabbonim, then don't come to Beis Din, because you'll just be angry at the Torah and nothing will be gained by it. I think I misunderstood her a little bit, and I think she realized that maybe she didn't communicate the way she wanted to, but it's just the nature of what it is. Avram Avinu. See, I had a parent ask me a few years ago. A parent said to me that on this week's Parsha, they were sitting at the Shabbos table Friday night, and one of the children at the table asked their father, like an 11-year-old child, said, Abba, Tati, Dad, if God came to you, and he knew it was God, and said to you to kill me, would you kill me? That's what the kid asked his father.
Good
Okay?
questions.
Okay? Imagine you're sitting at the Shabbos table, and your 11-year-old kid says to you, I'm just curious, Dad, if tonight you have a nevuah, and you know God is talking to you, and God says to you, go into your kid's room and kill him, would you kill me tonight? What would you answer? So, I mean, you can't say the answer is, well, God would never ask a person that question because he asked Avram that question. And then you can't say, well, he never really said to Avram to kill Yitzchak. He told him just to bring him up. Avram thought he meant to kill him, but he never really said to kill him. He says, I understand that. But what happens if God really said to kill him, What if God didn't just say bring it up? What if God says, take the knife in the drawer and just make sure you do a good job, chop off his head?
What if you tell your kid, if I will put you to sleep, it's also because of one of the six was death from the
Well,
I'll
so,
put you to sleep.
yeah,
And you wake
well,
up tomorrow,
I'll tell you this much, if my kid had a lock on the door, he'd probably lock the door that night, Someone asked me yesterday a question, it's just very interesting. It says, after the Akedah, right? It says that Avram went back home to Beersheba. Where did Yitzchak go? He went someplace else, right?
Yeah.
They say he went to Yeshiva.
Yeshiva, yeah.
Right. So I said, well, if you just tried killing your kid, chances are he's not going to go home with you. If you just took your kid and tied him up and put him on a mizbeach and held a knife to his throat, and the malach stopped you the last minute, chances are, your kid's not going to go home with you that night. You're going to go home alone that night. That's what I would say. There's a good chance you're going to go home alone that night. But, I don't remember what I told the father to say. Of course, the father probably said something like, Hashem would never ask that. He never asked that of Avraham, and therefore it's a question that we don't need to answer because it would never happen. That would be the answer that he would give. But the real answer, if you have to get real, is if God said that, what would you do? That means Avram had to ask himself, do I love my kid more than Hashem? Because ultimately, who do you listen to? You listen to the person you love more. That means if your wife tells you, if you get, in life, I remember I gave a person an example. They were making a wedding and they had to choose a day. This day was good for the parents and for the brothers and sisters, but now for the uncle and aunt, and now for the cousin. So how do you decide? So I said it's like dropping a rock in the water. It makes circles. Satisfy the closest, the inner circle, the immediate family. The next circles, if they can come to the wedding, great. If not, if an aunt calls you up and says, that day's not good for me, you'll say, no, I'm sorry. I really wish you were there. We're going to miss you. Have a safe trip. You know, what am I going to do? You can't go crazy.
Yeah.
You're gonna satisfy the husband and wife, maybe the grandparents and the kids. That's it. You know, when I had a bar mitzvah, my sister was in Israel. So what was I supposed to do? In those days, they didn't fly back and forth for in a whim. It was expensive. So I had my bar mitzvah. My sister wasn't there. She called and wished me mazel tov. What could I do? When she came back in the summer, she asked me would I read the parsha again. I said sure. I read Miketz for my bar mitzvah, and I read Parshas Pinchas the second time. Of course, Parshas Pinchas was longer than Parshas Miketz, and I said thank you very much to my sister. You know, and make sure you buy me a second bar mitzvah gift if I'm doing this a second time for her. A lot of love in the family. That was Mrs. Crone, so obviously I kept a good relationship with her. But, you know, what I'm trying to say to you is you're not going to satisfy everybody.
Yeah.
So you've got to satisfy the inner circle. And then you go from there as much as you can. You do the best you can. So clearly, Avram was conflicted. I love Yitzchak. He's my son. You know, but what about Hashem? I love Hashem more. Is that possible? Can a person love Hashem more than their child? I remember when the Chofetz Chaim's son died, he said, at the eulogy, he said, you told me to love you with all my heart. But when my son was born, I gave some of that love to him. Now that he has passed away, I'm going to again be able to love you with all my heart. That's what the Chofetz Chaim said at his son's funeral.
Hashem?
The Chofetz Chaim.
To love all to
Hashem.
Hashem.
Oh, okay.
He said that he apologized. He said, I'm sorry, Hashem, when my son was born, some of my heart, you know, I love my son. But now that he's died, I can now love you again with all my heart. That blows you away. I mean, how can anybody say that? So, you know, Avraham is torn, and he takes with him Eliezer, a student, and Yishmael, his other son. Now, they were not involved. So he must feel that he needs them for a reason. He took them for a reason. As if to say, this is a teaching moment, Eliezer should be there. Yitzchak is my son, Yishmael is my son. If he's going to lose a brother, maybe he should be there. Because who am I to deny you a brother? Maybe you have to be there. But by the third day, Avram Avinu is convinced that both Eliezer and Yishmael don't belong. And therefore he leaves them behind. And he says, there's nothing for you to see over here. You know, he leaves them behind, and he just forgets them completely. So, you know, it's really, really very difficult to understand. Now, up to the Akedah, every time it mentions Hashem's name, it uses Elokim, Midat Hadin. Afterwards, it's Malach Hashem, Midat Harachamim. Okay, so it's a little bit different. But the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer says that Yitzchak died at the Akedah. He says Yitzchak's neshama actually left him. A new neshama came. The first neshama was female. I don't know what that means. The second neshama was male. I'm not sure what that means. And it was only after he got the second neshama he was now able to get married and have children. So what does it say right after the Akedah? Very shocking. Normally you would think it would end after the Akedah, but no, it ends with an extra few psukim. Even on Rosh Hashanah we read these psukim. Vayhi achar devorim ha'ela, that Milcah had children, Lenochar, Achicha, and it lists 8 children and 4 from the Pelegish, 12 children, as if they could be the 12 tribes. And one of the children is Utz, and they say Utz is Eov. Eov was a big tzaddik. So, after the Akedah, instead of ending right there, Avram gets a message. Look how many children were born to Milcah and to Nochar, your brother. Now it's time to look for a wife for Yitzchak. Yitzchak was 37 years old. Why didn't you look for him for a wife 15 years ago? And the answer was because he wasn't able to get married 15 years ago.
Because he was neshama.
Because the neshama was the wrong neshama. And it was only after all this. And again, they say all this as if to tell you that all this was done in Shemayim to hide Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So in Shemayim they would think, oh, they're gone, they're dead, they're not relevant. So the focus should be in a different direction. And that's why Noach Milcha had 12 children. Maybe they're going to be the 12 tribes. Then Yaakov and Esav each had, they were going to have 12 children, Yaakov and Esav. Maybe they're going to be the 12 tribes. And Yishmael had 12. Maybe he's going to be the 12 tribes. Hashem created 12, numbers 12 everywhere. It created confusion. Confusion in Shemayim to protect Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. It's just interesting. There's a story here, I don't know if I ever told you this story, there's a story here with the Chafetz Chaim. That my friend brings this down, that a particular person, a Rabbi from the yeshiva, came to Radin and came into the yeshiva where the Chafetz Chaim was to daven, and he wanted to go over and speak to the Chafetz Chaim, and the minute the Chafetz Chaim saw him, he made like a face, and he left the room. And like people never saw this. Chafetz Chaim always had a smile, was always welcoming. And all of a sudden, the Chafetz Chaim sent a message to this guy, you're persona non grata. I don't want anything to do with you. So the guy couldn't believe it. What did I do? I didn't do anything. So he waited till at night, and he went over to the Chafetz Chaim's house, and he knocked on the door of the Chafetz Chaim, and he says, Rebbe, if I offended you in any way, I apologize. I ask mechila. And the Chafetz Chaim, instead of saying, listen, it's okay, everything's all right, the Chafetz Chaim says, it's all your fault. Millions of people are going to suffer because of you. Thousands of Jews will suffer and die because of you. It's all your fault. So he says, my fault? Millions of people are going to suffer because of me. What possibly did I do? What did I do? So he says, you were a Rebbe in the yeshiva, and you had a Jewish kid in the yeshiva named Label. And this kid came from a poor home, and he was a troublemaker, and you threw him out of the yeshiva. And that Label became Leon Trotsky. Leon Trotsky, who was the founder of communism, and it was anti-Torah and everything else. Socialism. So he says, that's all because of you. And therefore, everything that this Leon Trotsky did, I hold you responsible. And the Chafetz Chaim couldn't forgive him. And it's a fascinating story that the Chafetz Chaim couldn't forgive him. What?
Trotsky.
What about
He came to America, right?
I don't know whatever happened to him.
Yeah.
Where's he buried?
He changed the clothes to the woman and escaped from
Russia, came to America. And where did he die in America?
That's what they said.
And he's buried. Did anybody know where he's buried?
In Mexico.
I think they
He's
lost
buried
his-
there. We don't go to his grave. We don't say Tehillim or anything like that. They don't put little stones on his grave. In Denver, Colorado, I used to go to the grave of Buffalo Bill. There used to be this cowboy, Buffalo Bill. It was right near Coors, And when we go to the mountains, we would all go to Pikes Peak, and after Pikes Peak, we'd go to the grave of Buffalo Bill.
So he
the
saw,
Wild West.
at that time he saw already what's going to be, right?
The Chafetz Chaim, in one of the stories, there's a book called the Dibuk. Dibuk means when a neshama goes into someone else, it's a whole story. In one of the stories where they talk about the neshama, before the neshama was brought out, they could ask him some questions, and they asked him, what do they say in Shemaim about the Chafetz Chaim? So they say that his neshama was one of the pure neshamot on the level of one of the Tanaim, like a Tana. Now, a Tana lived 2,000 years ago. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was a Tana. Rabbi Meir was a Tana. Rabbi Akiva was a Tana. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was a Tana. The Chafetz Chaim, to be on that level, meant he had more than Nevuah, more than Ruach HaKodesh. It's scary. So, the Chafetz Chaim, and the Chafetz Chaim lived a very simple life, I know people say that if the Chafetz Chaim couldn't bring Mashiach, how can we bring Mashiach? And the answer is because we don't have to be better than the Chafetz Chaim. We're standing on his shoulders. That means the Chafetz Chaim created the foundation, and we're just on his shoulders. So we're higher just by virtue of the fact that we're on his shoulders. So, that's how they describe the Chofetz Chaim. But the Chofetz Chaim was, was unbelievable in many, many levels. He brings down over here by Lot, and again, it's a little bit complicated. It's just a few minutes, and I have to leave a little bit early because I have people coming to see me. Why was Lot saved? I mean, Sodom was a horrible town. Okay, we all agree Sodom was a bad place. The 4 kings, the 5 kings, they battle. Sodom is taken captive. Avram comes, he saves Lot. Okay. Don't you think Lot should have said at that point, maybe it's time I went back to Avram, why go back to Sodom? I mean, so the short answer is that Lot didn't want to go back to Avram. Because Avram was such a big tzaddik. And he would be, if I'm living next to Avram, you know what Hashem will think of me? I'm the biggest Rosh in the world. When I'm by Sodom, I'm a big tzaddik. Sometimes you ask yourself, do you want to be the head of the fox or the tail of a lion? What would you rather be? Logic says, be the tail of a lion. At least you're part of the lion. Lot wanted to be the head of the fox. So he didn't want to go back to Avram. He had opportunities. He didn't want to go back. Yet Avram kept saving Lot. It came the first time by the kings. He saves Lot. Now Sodom is about to be destroyed. Hashem says, I have to save Lot. Why? Well, he was good to Avram. Is that enough of a reason? I don't know. The answer they give is that Lot had to be saved. And I'm going to tell you more about this next year, because Lot had to be saved because Lot was, Mashiach comes from Lot. Mashiach ben David, Ruth, from Moab. So, we know to fight Yishmael, we need Mashiach ben David. We're not going to get a Mashiach ben David without the Lot and Moab. So, believe it or not, we're constantly risking our lives to save this Lot guy. And we have to, because if we don't do it, we're shooting ourselves in the foot because we can't defeat Yishmael without David. So in this week's Parsha, which is Vayera, next year we're going to learn all about David HaMelech. And you're going to say, what does David HaMelech have to do with Parshas Vayera? And the answer is everything. Because without David HaMelech, we can't destroy Yishmael. And we can't get to David HaMelech without Rus. Now, of course, we need to ask ourselves, what was it that Rus had in her DNA that nobody else had?
Mother's
Well, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Yosef, Yehuda, Peretz, Zarach, Nachshon ben Aminadov, Kolev. I mean, Mashiach comes from a very Yishai, big tzaddikim, right? Big family, good family, top notch, royalty. And yet, they all were missing an ingredient that could only come from the non-Jewish girl born from Lot in a very not nice way through Moab. So there was some secret ingredient. And we're fighting to protect this guy Lot, right? We're fighting to protect him just for that. Lot's wife we didn't protect. She turned around and she was lost. Lot's other daughters who were married and the husbands wouldn't let them go, Hashem didn't create a miracle where they were saved. Gone. So it was Lot and these 2 girls. And next year, we'll find out why.
next year.
Not this year.
Hey, I have a question.
Next year.
I don't
Don't
know.
set your clocks now. November next
I
year.
have a question. Why do we down in the Psalm Shalom they have that and Tishkom Doch, we see that Mashiach ben Yosef shouldn't die by Armilus Sarasha.
That who shouldn't die?
Mashiach ben Yosef shouldn't die by Armilus Sarasha.
Right. So
Going to this
the question: does he die? Does he not die? Who he is? It's complicated because these things are so unknown and there's so many midrashim. But we're going to find out. And we're going to find out exactly.
It means there's a war according to some astrologies that saying there's a war going to be between the stars because they explode over there, and Armilos means the star, one of the stars.
Could be.
One of the midrashim that explain. Heard from Rabbi Tzadok.
And we talk about people near-death experiences. Look at David HaMelech. He was supposed to die without any years, so that's a near-death experience. Then he has to face down Goliath. That could not have been easy. And then his family rejects him, as if he's not even a kosher child. And then when he kills Goliath, Shaul HaMelech says, who is this guy? Everybody knew who he was. So Doeg Adomi comes and says, I don't even know if he's a kosher Jew. He says, well, why not? Well, his mother's from Moab, Well, what's the problem? You're not allowed to marry from Moab. So Avner or whatever says, no, that's not true. That only applies to the men, not the women. He says, really? So the law of Mamzer can't get married. Only applies to the men, not the women. And Egyptians, it only applies to the men, not the women. And non-Jews, only applies to the men, not the women. So he says he didn't have the answer. Doeg was a big Talmud Chacham. He wasn't the nicest guy, but he was a big Talmud Chacham. So we're going to go into that, Every corner, every time David HaMelech tried to take one step forward, he was knocked back 2-3 steps. Why? Because in Shemayim, they had to believe this guy will amount to nothing. And when everybody was focused, was redirected someplace else, Mashiach can be born. It's almost as if you have to do you have to redirect people's attention away from Am Yisrael. And the more we attract attention to ourselves, the more trouble we get into. Like we have to go through this world hoping that the hidden, in a type of hidden fashion. To be continued. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Just beginning.
So